So invited today to talk about the intersection of spirituality and harm reduction work. I am in San Francisco, California, in the Tenderloin neighborhood. I want to first say that I'm practicing decentering my voice as a white guy, but I'm here to talk today. So I'm gonna try to center my voice a little more. I'm a little nervous. I want to say that more globally, San Francisco in the last year or so, obviously, like many cities in the world, it's going through COVID, and normally our services were located up on the 5th floor. And then we moved up to the 6th floor. We took over what used to be a clinic here. And during COVID, Glide Foundation on Ellis Street in San Francisco between Jones and Taylor, we feed 3 meals a day. We have a walk-in center that in times not COVID was the access point for people entering the adult shelter system. So we are literally the beating heart of the Tenderloin in that way. The harm reduction program here has been here for about 10 years. It was under the direction of Paul Harkin, and now we have a new director, Juliana, who's really awesome, who just joined us a few months ago. So I'm in the management position. I have a bunch of people that I supervise that do navigation work, which is HIV and Hep C services, which includes testing. And if people, it turns out, are living with those issues, we get them referred to care in the community. Or also syringe access, so drug user health stuff. So we have harm reduction. The way I think about it is that harm reduction happens on a couple of levels. Like there's lowercase harm reduction, which is the provision of actual services, needles and safe smoking supplies, straight shooters and bubbles and tinfoil and all the stuff. We've definitely seen a movement more recently during the times of COVID and a little before that to former injection drug users moving to smoking it, which is actually kind of a harm reduction movement, which is great, which we were actually trying to promote for a long time. In San Francisco, the drug use has moved from tar heroin to fentanyl. So there's a lot of dangerous stuff going on with that. So we try to educate people as much as possible. And I want to say a more bigger picture. Glide is a church, and you could do a deep dive into the history of Glide. It was, the famous Cecil Williams, that was the pastor for many years, and we had a lot of radical stuff, and we're basically the unconditionality of people coming in. So we got a lot of Buddhists and a lot of people who identify as Jewish, and a lot of different faiths that come and coalesce here, Muslims. And the service isn't called a service, it's a Sunday celebration. So it's a real magical, inclusive kind of space. A lot of people of color and a lot of activists from other realms that kind of coalesce in this space on Sundays. Another thing that you could do a lot of Googling and research about, if you wanted to, is the fact that Glide Church was, Lizzie Glide gave the church to Cecil back in the 60s with the agreement that it remained a Methodist church. And so there was a bunch of legal stuff that I actually don't know that much about. but we ended up in kind of a settlement in which Glide has gained its independence from the Methodist Church, and so now it's just Glide, which is great. And I want to say that I consider the work that I do spiritual, and in the sense that the buzzword for harm reduction is meeting people where they're at, and the thing I tell to my excuse me one second. The thing that I talk about with my supervisees under me is to really try to practice unconditional positive regard. And I'm going to go ahead and ask a question and see if people want to respond in the chat. And this isn't my idea. It's a really cool code tenderloin activist by the name of Del Seymour whose office is down the street from us. And I hung out with him the other day, and he was talking about, have you ever been broke? And I was like, yeah, I've been broke before. I have what people call in the helping professions lived experience, right? I know I'm formerly incarcerated. I had a problematic relationship with drugs. And I certainly have been homeless, and I've certainly been broke, right? And so what does that mean? Understanding on a deep level the pain of living in a capitalist, racist society, and how that affects people, especially in the criminal justice system. I want to say that, when I speak to people that I supervise, I say to keep in mind that the person that you're interacting with in the moment may be stressed out. They may be broke. They may be having mental health concerns. They may be, high. They may be under the influence of methamphetamine or, who knows what. And so the point of having and embodying this idea of unconditional positive regard is, even if the person that you're meeting in the moment is yelling at you, to try to maintain equanimity and just continue to bring positiveness. And it does sound a little cheesy, but as an institution, we at Glide used to feed all our meals in the building, and now we feed it out on the street, and we actually don't let clients in the building. So what it did was take us from the 6th floor down to the 1st floor, and as a result, we're seeing a lot more people. And the Tenderloin is a very busy neighborhood. There's a lot of SRO hotels, and there's a lot of drug activity. We see a lot of people in various states of that present in many different ways. And it's a process to learn how to sort of de-escalate and really meet people where they're at in those moments. And it's become for me a spiritual practice, right? Because I personally have to do an enormous amount of self-care to stay in this work for the long haul, right? I don't want to burn out, and we're always very conscious about the way burnout manifests, and especially in the time of COVID, right? We never missed a day of work. I don't know if you can see this, but the essential worker badge, from the city, that I basically have not missed a day of work in the whole time during COVID. So So not only did we take our services from the 6th floor down to the 1st floor, and our syringe access desk is on the 1st floor, but also we go out into the community. And I saw one of the other breakout groups was about street medicine and outreach. And I wish I could have seen that, because that's one of the beautiful manifestations that have arisen out of COVID. And COVID had a lot of positive sides to it. One of which is formerly siloed organizations are now collaborating in a way they never did before. And there's a bunch of other organizations in the community that we collaborate with. One of which I just mentioned, Code Tenderloin. They have this thing called Compassionate Corners. When there's a shooting in the neighborhood, they bring a table out and some chairs and plop it right down on the very block where there was a shooting the day before. And we're planning on collaborating with them with that, and bringing supplies and PPE and hand sanitizer and masks and drug user supplies to those tables, so that we can provide services for people while they're asking questions and having discussions about what just happened and the effect on the neighborhood. Another collaboration, which I'll mention, is street medicine. In San Francisco, street medicine is a Department of Public Health service that is basically, the idea is like a clinic without walls. So they will go out to the community and find people who would not normally make a scheduled appointment. And so as a result, we're able to get people to care who can't make it to the clinic. In San Francisco, the government has relied on the police to respond to homelessness. I think this is true in a lot of cities, but in San Francisco, it's particularly bad in terms of the cost of living here. I was born and raised here, and I, as a young drug user myself, never really saw open drug use, because people had places to go, people had places to live. But as the prices of rent have risen through the roof, San Francisco is one of the most expensive cities in the world. And what we see is many, many, many more homeless people, and many people of color that are struck homeless, and neighborhoods kind of get over policed. And like I said before, San Francisco has San Francisco Police Department has a division called HSOC, which is an acronym which stands for Healthy Streets Operations Center. And they have an office where, like, if you make a 311 is a service where you call 311 to have the Department of Public Works come and clean up areas, but also people throw in a lot of complaints about homeless people there. And all those 311 complaints get filed through this HSOC agency. So I've spoken at their office to a crowd of cops, and it was probably one of the hardest things I ever did in my life, because it's a room full of guys like with their arms crossed and like listening to me talk about compassionate interventions. So that was funny, but I could see up on the walls in this office, HSOC office, that there were big screens that showed all the complaints coming in, and the number of complaints, like, statistically has risen probably 20-fold, 100-fold. So people who rent here in San Francisco are paying enormous amounts of money, and many of whom are employed in the tech companies, and they if they own their property, they don't want homeless people around. And during COVID, we had a huge campaign of handing out tents in the streets. And and you start to see tents pop up around, and whole communities of rows of tents, and like many cities, Oakland, Los Angeles, or you pick the city, pretty much everyone has a homeless problem that's pretty over the top. Different cities deal with it in different ways, but there's a commonality of over policing and oppression, and definitely a lack of compassion. I was involved for a number of years with a project called LEAD, which is called Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion. And so we were diverting people from an arrest, a possibility of an arrest, and they would actually refer the people over to harm reduction case managers like myself. We had hundreds and hundreds of referrals, and it was a beautiful program, but unfortunately did not get refunded. One of the things that happened politically here in San Francisco is that hotels got taken over by the city because during COVID they couldn't be filled with regular hotel clients. So now we have this whole probably 65 or more hotels that have been turned into housing for formerly unhoused people. So it's actually a pretty amazing opportunity to bring some care and some love into those spaces, and also to be able to engage and hook people up with services that were formerly hard to find. Many of whom don't have the technology necessary to, certainly not to attend a Zoom call like this, but or even to be able to call them back. So it's great that they have a hotel and a room number, and we can leave notes and we can show up. So that's a beautiful manifestation of COVID as well, that we have this opportunity. So a lot of the funds that were left over from the LEAD project got diverted into this new SIP hotel outreach, which we're doing. And we just hired 2 new harm reduction case manager positions to go to the SIP hotel. So we're really excited about that. So we get to do some outreach in the community in that way. One of my self-care, I have a whole list of self-care things that I do for myself and recommend for other people if they ask, but one of them is yoga, and during the COVID times, just like the gyms in many cities, the yoga studios closed. And so before COVID, I was doing 4 or 5 classes a week of vinyasa hot yoga. And those studios were closed. So what I ended up doing was studying more of the written philosophy. And the philosophy is actually really beautiful. One of the principles of yoga philosophy is this idea of ahimsa, which is basically do no harm, or non-harming. And I think that this is a really important principle to embrace in for me, just for myself, like trying not to harm myself, because I see a lot of people, especially people like myself who have a bit of lived experience, tend to pour themselves into the work, and to the point where you get DTM, you're doing too much, and and it happens. It happens a lot of times, as we're moving through the world. Like, we don't see it ourselves, but other people can see, like, whoa, buddy, you're a little manic today. Like, slow down a little bit. Like, and so, yeah. And so I just, I have to keep returning to that for my own longevity in this work. And I also encourage other people to embody that.
Jason.
Yeah.
This is Deb. I know you had started to open up the chat. First of all, I want to say, wow, Glide is doing some amazing work, and just an honor to hear about all of the programs that are out there. And I know somebody said in the chat that they love that. They love that you lead with compassion. And a couple of questions.
Sure.
I know you had asked a question, but I didn't know whether you were asking, had anybody been broke? Did you want them to respond? But when you think about your church and you think about harm reduction, how did it come? Can you talk just a little bit about how Glide happened to come into this particular stance and accept harm reduction and offer it to the community? And then maybe you want to open it up for questions or something like that afterwards.
Yeah, Deborah, thank you so much. I'm totally open to questions. I think the quick soundbite way to say how Glide sort of arrived at embracing harm reduction is that we have principles. You can look them up again on the website, but radical inclusivity is one of the principles, and I think that we sort of happened by accident, to be honest. Like the harm reduction program started small in the clinic on the 6th floor and started expanding, and then we started taking up more offices and getting more funding, and it pretty much blew up. And we have a whole team of outreach workers that go out into the city, and it's a beautiful thing. Especially during the holidays. Glide is pretty famous for throwing big holiday parties, and we got to use our outreach vehicles as a modality for that, and had we have a staff member who's a sister of perpetual indulgence. I don't know if you guys know about that, but also you can look that up. But went out in full sister drag out into the community and gave out food to people. It was just a beautiful thing to check out.
Thank you for sharing that. So we'll open it up for questions. We got about 20 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.